Conor O'Neill here from Everyday Athlete, where we work with everyday athletes who want to pursue their athletic goals in endurance running, strength training, physique change, and sport. In this podcast, my guests and I discuss principles, strategies, and stories that may help you in pursuit of your own athletic goals and in your life outside of that too. When we first met, we were both going through a business accelerator course up in Belfast, and I was just starting out the nutrition coaching, and I believe you were either still part of Ulster Rugby or you were just finishing up in your sports psychology role there. And I remember being very interested in your role within that and hearing about, what happens within professional sport environments and stuff like that. So what were you seeing on a day-to-day practical basis in terms of how those athletes were implementing better psychology practices and what you were doing within that role as well?
Yeah, I suppose Ulster Rugby was 5 seasons I was there, so that was 16 to 21 the year after COVID. So it was sort of part of a multidisciplinary team, so obviously they would cover all the bases there in terms of all the needs that an athlete needs to be at their best, sort of no stone left unturned. So within that, my role was sort of looking at, we were assigned individual players to work one-to-one. I co-delivered the programme alongside Kelly Fay. I'm not sure if you've heard of Kelly, but Kelly's phenomenal practitioner as well, so she's went on to do great things with me, ladies, and just different inter-county GA teams. But it was obviously I had half the athletes, Kelly had half the athletes for one-to-one. Then it would have been integrating our services, then supporting the coaches as well, integrating psychology within training times, and then on match day we would have been doing small interventions as well. So it was pretty varied, Conor. Great times, and I suppose I learned a lot from that as well. Just the insights, as much as anything, from the one-to-ones from the players at that level was, for me was always great. And I always reflect back on that. It was brilliant times for me as well.
The two different sort of aspects to it, one being the more, as you said, one-to-one aspect of working with players, but also the bigger picture idea of looking at the team environment and, I suppose, creating a culture and creating an environment of improving the overall look at things. And you talked about different aspects of looking at different videotape and how to look at critically assessing your own performance and how managers are giving examples of how they were doing that. What aspects were you working on there from the overall team environment?
Yeah, so the team environment, as I mentioned, I was integrating it within training. So over the summer in particular, in preparation for so that was working with the underage teams, the schoolboys, under 19s, under 20s teams. We would have been trying to sort of prepare them for the sort of the pressures that such they would have been facing come into pro. So we was really trying to simulate that within training on certain occasions. The US military have a real cool mantra, or the US Navy SEALs: under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. So it's trying to train at that level where you're going through the same emotions, the same sort of having to make decisions with similar, I suppose, as best as you recreate it, similar pressure scenarios that you'll be facing in the game. So we would have been setting scenarios up where you maybe had Team A against Team B. So Team A, for example, had 2 minutes to they're kicking for touch, and they have to, from the liner, get a try and a conversion. So Kieran, the coach, would have been giving them, right, this is your scenario, 30 seconds, how are you going to, Team A, how are you going to achieve that? Team B, how are you going to defend that? So it was communicating, this was forcing them then to communicate under pressure. But then I suppose there would have been sort of small consequences where tallies over the course of the game would have been tallied up, and then there was a small consequence on the team that scored less points or whatever, the team that lost more scenarios than the one. It was something silly like, making burgers for the other guys, but it was still it was still trying to have some form of consequence, obviously, that you're going to face in a game, if you don't perform. So, and that was really powerful, because I think it said, there was a couple of incidents where players sort of lost the run of themselves. Maybe the pressure got to them, and there was videos on them as well, so they knew they were being critiqued. But there was a couple of incidents where discipline went, decision making went, communication went, and you were able to look back at that and reflect collectively on it. So even Kieran would have been really important, like giving the players a voice. So they would have maybe went and after the session looked at the video themselves, chatted through, and then presented back to the coaches what their main findings were. So obviously one of the occasions that stuck out from memory was that idea of real discipline going. So the idea was that, I suppose, that the feedback came back was that just the clarity of thought in those moments sort of went. So we did something interesting where Kieran got one of the senior Ulster players in, Rory Best, then to share his experience with the boys in terms of how to self-regulate, how to think more clearly in those moments. And I remember him talking around the idea of squared breathing. So then I suppose the journey of that intervention was we then did a second bout of pressure training, but the boys then implemented that psychological skill of squared breathing when the heat was turned on. So I suppose for us the power in that was then it was I suppose noticing these trends, noticing these things happening within your training, and then you can adapt so that you're ready come game time, rather than, I guess, it happening in the heat of a game. So I suppose it was learning through your training, and it was, that's kind of the angle. One of them, I remember in particular one summer we took with that, it was quite effective.
Yeah, because it gives you the opportunity, I suppose, to not only see what's going to crack under pressure, and where for the individuals where they're going to crack under pressure for themselves, but also a chance to practice it. Because if you're only practicing high pressure decision making when there's actual stakes on the line, especially in professional sport, you're not getting that many opportunities to practice that, where there's not actual stakes professionally on the line. But also, that's not the time to be finding out that you're not able to perform in a certain area.
And I think it's transferable across any walk of life. You've a pitch to give, job interview coming up. So it's trying to recreate those conditions that you're going to be faced in that pressure environment within your practice setting and such. And we'll touch on it later. We would work in schools quite a bit, but we use the same concept when working with students preparing for GCSEs, where one of our pillars of that workshop is looking at a simulation where you're trying to get them to recreate those conditions that they're going to be faced in the exam within their revision, within their studying, so that when it comes to the exams, they've been through it, they've lived it, they're familiar with it, they're more comfortable with it.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember Gareth Fox on a previous episode talking about the idea of creating a safe environment for people to take risks. And it just came to me there that there's probably a balance between the two aspects of, you want to be able to practice in a safe environment where you're able to take risks, but you also want to be able to practice in a, let's say, unsafe, but maybe unsafe is the wrong word, in a high pressure environment where there are stakes, because that's ultimately where you're going to be asked to perform down the line.
Oh yeah, and it's all to do with timing as well. With that, you can't be putting boys through that, or in my opinion, you can't be putting athletes through that week, day in, day out, because it would create probably that relentless environment which you probably aren't looking. And I did listen to Gareth's podcast. Thought it was great as well, so shout out to Gareth. But I suppose that idea of psychological safety, you'll hear about now quite a bit in team cultures as well, where people feel safe to I suppose be their authentic selves, feel safe to speak up, but also feel safe to absolutely make mistakes. Because if you're not feeling safe to make mistakes, or you're not going to try things then, and you're not going to take risks. And ultimately, from my opinion as a coach as well, like, I would want my players to take risks as well. So you're 100% right. There's a balance to it. Yeah,
and it probably is as well what you, I think, spoke about previously as well, about the putting, yes, as you said, them into that high stakes environment and putting them under the pressure, but also on the other side of that, it's not a case of coming down like a ton of bricks on someone who's made a mistake. It's a matter of critically evaluating the situation and seeing how can we move forward and how can we improve it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. The strands of resilience and whatever, and all the research points to it. There's a guy, Dr. Mustafa Sarkar. He's one of those world leading experts in the area of resilience, and he talks around, just the different performance environments you can create, and it's based off the concept of challenge and support. So when you've a low challenge, low support environment, it's stagnant. Where you've high challenge, low support, that's that relentless stress-inducing environment where burnout can happen and all that goes up. I suppose all those maladaptive traits you see in an environment, but ultimately what you're looking to do is challenge and support, and he calls that facilitative environment. So yeah, that's a really good point, Connor.
Yeah, interesting. That's like the zone of proximal development and the flow state and all those things tend to hit that sweet spot as well between the challenge and challenge and skills, and for challenge and support as well, I suppose. So yeah, as I was saying, within the one-to-one aspect of it, were there any particular, say, mental skills or aspects of psychological skills training that you would be implementing with players, or they would be implementing that they would have found useful, that maybe someone could start looking into themselves who's listening?
Yeah, I suppose the one-to-one side of things, it really dependent upon where the players were in their journey, or so the scale of athlete that I was working with was basically whenever they left school, in the academy the first time until they got a senior contract. But a lot of the guys were still in the academy playing senior, so you would have been working one-to-ones with those guys who were playing, at that top level. But it was all dependent upon, the player and what they needed, where they were at a particular time. But absolutely, there would have been, I suppose, a few examples. And it was generally I try to create it where the player was, I suppose, coming to their own conclusions as well, which was and what was right for them, which was powerful. But there was, so that you might have had guys going to the Junior World Cup, for an example, so it was preparing them psychologically for that. So I suppose one of the aspects, or one of the simple questions I would have liked to ask them, well, what will excellence look like over this World Cup campaign? So finish the sentence for me. You've come back, we're going into the future here, it's the end of the World Cup, you're back, we're having a one-to-one after the World Cup. Like, what does an excellent campaign look like? Finish that sentence, and then why? Why has that been the case? So it's almost trying to create the idea of like, well, right, this is the outcome, but these are the processes behind that. So I remember doing that exercise with one of the players, and he came back from the World Cup. He had a pretty good World Cup, but he talked around, like, I think it was I can't even remember the key strands, but the takeaway from me was the fact that after the discussion we had, he had went home and he had screenshotted those 3 key processes, and that was his screensaver for the duration of the World Cup. So anytime he was looking at that, it was just a trigger or a reinforcement to him. This is what I'm looking to, this is how excellence is going to look for me. I remember a conversation as well with another player, and this was just around, I suppose, dealing with setbacks, really, where he had been playing senior for quite a few games. I think he was maybe his 15th or 16th cap, and one of the games in particular, he was front row. That had got the scrum hadn't gone well, so he had really underperformed, and the spotlight was shone on him. So I met with him on the Tuesday after the game, and I was trying to, delve into how did you manage that? How did you deal with that? And he says, well, going very simply, I took the laptop out, downloaded the game, and watched the game back to find out, right, this is why this happened. These are where these things went wrong. And he was able to make notes in terms of what he needed to work on Tuesday, or back in training on Monday or Tuesday. And I thought that was brilliant, because that was him, being able to let go of that. He's made peace with the fact, this is what I need to do to improve. Right, scrap that. That's put away. I can get on with my weekend here. And then obviously he has a clear focus for his next training. So Yeah, and then there was other psychological skills we worked on with the boys, that your basic skills, your imagery, your visualization, self-talk, some like to create montages, leading up to an important game of them being at their best, previous clips of, they actually would have dialed in with the guys that did the video analysis to get right over the last 4 or 5 BNI Cup games. Can you clip these montages for me? So they were able to watch that, get into the next game then, and that idea of past performances is I suppose is a strand of confidence. So that, so they would have been, I suppose, some examples, Connor, thinking of.
Very good. Yeah, no, it's very good. It's stuff that actually a lot of people could do, especially with the video analysis availability, even within GA and stuff now. There is the opportunity for lads to be taking away the game tape and looking at it, and it's probably a thing that people individually don't do as much of, that they could really a lot of benefit from, because I think, as you talked about, the player there who went away and straight away looked back and highlighted where things went wrong and was able to take away from it. It gives you, it's a different sort of psychological thing that I'd heard of, where someone had said that if you are holding on to something and you have a strong emotion about something that happened in the past, it's because you haven't yet taken the lesson from it.
Yes.
And if you're able to take that lesson from that past experience, it removes that need to keep remembering it as just this bad emotional experience, and turns it into actually something that you can remember positively, because you've taken a positive lesson away from it. And to be able to go back and do that, I think could be very helpful for somebody who holds on to poor performances from the past. Not to mention, obviously, practically allowing you to do those things in an improved way going forward. But yeah, it's interesting that your main role there was supporting young athletes through their journey from, say, a junior position to a senior position in a lot of cases, and the journey along the way, because I know that that's a big part of what you do now, but in a very different context. Within the school environment is, supporting students and pupils at any point along their way within their education, which has turned from you working in the sports environment to school environment with HIP. So where did HIP come into the journey? And what is it exactly that you do?
Yeah, so I, in a previous life, was a sports coach. So I worked for a program called Active Communities, which was working in the council areas. I was coaching football, and I at the time probably would have described myself as like a frustrated sports coach, because I was seeing trends and traits in children through sport that I wasn't really able to support them with. So, for example, if a game wasn't going their way, some children maybe would have been quite negative towards themselves, so their own self-talk. Maybe just would have quit in the moment. I've seen an instance where children stopped, or if you were trying to teach them a new skill, they weren't grasping, they weren't fully invested in it. Other children then were, if a game wasn't going their way, they was maybe blaming the ref, they were maybe lashing out at the opposition. Things you would see, I suppose, even an adult still playing.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have the skill set and tools to support the children on, essentially, I suppose if you call a spade, the psychological and emotional development side of sport. So I did two things. I studied and got a master's in sport and exercise psychology, and then I went and spent time in America. I spent 8 weeks, I think, but a number of years ago, and that was going around looking at different sports environments, educational environments, just seeing what they were doing out there, and really essentially what I could learn from it. So I spent time in IMG Academy in Florida. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's huge. Like, as a sports complex. I think at the time there was like 11 mental conditioning coaches alone working there. Like, it's a complex bigger than my village of Dundrum, so it's huge. And I was listening actually to a podcast. One of the guys who was on was one of the mental conditioning coaches on it. He's pretty well known now, Justin Sue. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Justin.
The name sounds familiar.
Increase Your Impact podcast. So he's he was brilliant, you know, being able to observe and learn there. Went and spent time in South Carolina as well at a junior sports academy there, and then I've spent time in JFK University in California with it was the sports psychology master's program, but sort of it was a very, very different experience where, as part of their placement, the students spent a week in a young offenders correctional facility where they were delivering life skills to young offenders. So that was looking at, you know, self-esteem, their ability to communicate with others, all those sort of life skills. So I suppose I came back from that, and then brought some ideas back here, and then just, I suppose, created hip psychology. So I suppose our mantra is we're trying to help support schools in areas of emotional well-being, social skills, positive behaviour, and then obviously learning and exam performance. Programs from when the children, or not, they're not all children, but when pupils first come in the door at 4 years old to when they leave the school setting at 18, and then each and every step of that educational journey in between. And we would support staff as well. We have staff training around staff well-being, and you know, which is obviously an important area as well. So that's pretty much how hip psychology came about, and I suppose what we do at present.
Yeah. What would you generally see as like the main themes for younger kids that you would be working on that maybe they'd be struggling with?
It depends on the age. Connor, like we would have, like from whenever they first come in, you know, 4 and 5, a lot of it's around building friendships and, you know, things maybe they're not used to in the home life, like even the concept of sharing, how to make friends, you know, listening skills, you know, small, simple, important aspects. And then as they get up to school, then I suppose nine workshops in primary school, 3 in Key Stage 1, 6 in Key Stage 2. One of the interesting things that came out there a number of years ago, we sent surveys out to staff, you know, in terms of what are you seeing in the children that is most prominent, that need support with. And the big thing came back actually was huge, was anxiety. So a lot of it came, I suppose, that age group where that had been through COVID and they'd lost that 6 months of you know, like friendships, social skills, just being with their peers. So we created a workshop for that, for Children's Mental Health Week. Other thing as well, I suppose a big thing would be we deliver one of our flagship workshops is our anti-bullying week workshop. We run like a huge event there over that week. It's called a megathon, where you might have 6,000-7,000 children on that across that week, and that's helping children really identify the different, like what bullying type behaviour is and what it's not. We go in with that idea, you know, when they've got that understanding and clarity, you're aiming to reduce incidents of the actual behaviour itself. But an issue in schools as well, you would find, is like where children are unknowingly but wrongly accusing other children of that bullying type behaviour, and that can be quite painful as well, to have that label put on you as well. So just that information piece as well, where by the end of that they've got a pretty good understanding of what exactly it looks like and what it is. And then we would, like all our workshops, we would try to make relatable, fun, you know, so like Taylor Swift themes going on. We have an interactive quiz where they have to decide if it's bullying type behaviour or not. There's a big leaderboard, so there's a pretty big buzz around it as well. So that's quite important as well, that you can relate to people in a level that engages them.
Yeah, I'd imagine well, I say it'd be a hard thing to do, but for someone experiencing it, it's probably something that's an art form in itself, is being able to engage children in that way, with obviously it being very different to, say, working with a group of adults who are chosen to be there, probably paid money to be at an educational conference or whatever, versus kids who all they want to do is run around.
Well, I suppose it's good to get them at that age though. There was an analogy about the difference between I think it's probably quite generic, like, but the difference between working with children versus the, even people at the end of their football career, like, it's like the analogy was given, like soft cement versus hard cement. Where you can shape and change and maybe mold children, or they've maybe a lot more of an open mind, where I suppose the more experienced you get, that cement can be hardened. I suppose it is a bit generic, but I suppose we'll look at the football changing room I played, and you can kind of get where that analogy is coming from.
Oh yeah, and you know it by looking at kids. Anyone who spent time around kids knows how sponge-like they are and what they'll pick up. They'll say the exact phrases that you come out with on a daily basis, and you'll be going, where do they come from? And yeah, you're like, it's quite clear where they come from. They just absorb everything that they're hearing. But it's interesting. So what are the differences in terms of the struggles that those younger kids would have versus, say, teenagers? And is there unique things probably even in today's world with teenagers as well that maybe wouldn't have existed before?
Some of the challenges would have existed before. Like when I reflect back on my own time at school, we would support them in that the transition between primary versus secondary, all those changes and challenges between, like, even myself, I was going from a school with 80 children where you've got P1s, 4-year-olds, to, like, within the space of 2 months, suddenly I'm at a school, there's 900 pupils, where of one teacher I've now got 12 teachers of one subject, or no, sorry, in the same room, versus like of a timetable, navigating around a building that's 15 times the size, organisation, buses, all those things, from at that age. So we would have a Ready for Action Year 8 workshop where we look at helping children, embrace those changes and challenges and give them the tools to help with that. Even then, Year 10, we would help them with the psychology behind choices, where we help them look at their interests, their strengths, right? What might a career look like, right, in that field, or what might a career look like in terms of where your interests and your strengths lie. And then, right, backtrack into the present day at the Year 10, right, what are the subjects I might need to be picking, or at least be thinking and picking to get on that path? So I suppose they would be things we would deliver. Well, I brought a guy in Kevin Anderson to work with us as well. He's a Key Stage 4 or Year 14 here in Castlewell, and he's created a lot of content based on the challenges of older pupils. So that's preparing them for interviews for university, interviews for jobs, and then managing finances. So it is pretty wide ranging, Connor. Like, and we try to keep it as current as we possibly can as well. So two of the challenges that are being faced with pupils at the minute, and they're probably to an extent related, is obviously social media, but there seems to be a massive concern at the minute in schools around vaping. So yeah, it seems to be what once teacher described as like a tsunami almost, where a huge majority of pupils are engaging in it, and it seems to be because obviously you look on social media, it looks trendy, it looks cool, whereas in our day the equivalent was smoking. But when smoking, you could look at their teeth, talk around yellow fingers, whereas vaping now, influencers are doing it on social media. It's what they're seeing, but don't know the impact it's having. So we're currently working alongside Queen's University Belfast. We're teaming up with the health psychology department there to maybe look at shaping and creating a workshop that then we can take out to the schools. So so from P1s making friends till interview skills and vaping, we've tried to cover each and every step of the way.
But a lot of it is that stuff, you would often hear or say it yourself, why didn't we learn this stuff at school? You'd say it about various topics. And a lot of those topics are topics that you're actually covering and bringing into school. So it's something that I think is very worthwhile and something that's very, hopefully is very, very well taken up. It sounds like it is within schools.
Well, even though what we know from research is like those emotional intelligence, skills of emotional intelligence, empathy, optimism, things like that, they're actually more powerful in predicting future success than IQ. So there's elements of what we try to do, those sort of soft skills as well with pupils, because they're crucial, to being able to to communicate with others, to interact as part of a team. All those things that are important for getting on in life.
Yeah. And you also have the staff then that you be working with as well. And obviously it's staff training within the business you're working on, but essentially it's adult versus teenagers versus children. So it's going to be very applicable to anybody basically who's an adult. So it's something that I wanted to bring up because it can be directly applicable for people even listening. What are some of the things that you might work on with the staff, or what are the things that you found that they've found most useful? I know you talked about the keeping the table stable concept as well, which is something that I'd found interesting, and something that I definitely resonated with in my own experience of just observing people and observing where people potentially could be improving things. Probably speak for myself as well. So what concepts, including potentially keeping the table stable, will be implementing with the staff then?
So yeah, that's basically to equate to that idea of work-life balance. Obviously, it's something that's important in any walk of life. That we're like trying to keep stability, trying to keep life on track. That we're not verging into that, I suppose, area of burnout. But I suppose the analogy I would give is almost looking at life like a table, and the function of a table is to balance things on to stay stable. And what enables a table to stay stable are strong legs. So when we look at when I look at the legs of life, it's like your professional leg, your health leg, and then a leg called triple F, which is fun, family, and friends. So that's that social side of things. So if I suppose in any given occasion, if we're maybe neglecting one of those legs, so maybe we're not doing a triple F leg, for example, we're not doing things that give us joy, give us fulfillment, give us meaning. We're maybe not checking in with our family, friends, doing those important social things. We're maybe isolating. We're just maybe, so essentially what you're doing there is you're removing a leg, and now your table is on two legs. Then what can happen? It absolutely happened to me in the past, and I know it'll be common within the teaching industry, but within, I suppose, other workplace environments where people just get so totally immersed in their work, to neglect of their health, or maybe then their sleep pattern isn't great. They're maybe not they're not doing the things they know they should to support their health. They're missing out and going for that important walk. They're maybe not looking after your nutrition. Those brilliant basics of mental health. Like sleep, movement, nutrition. So now essentially you've removed a second leg, so you're now on one leg. And my mum, she's from the country, she would say she's in danger of coping. So that's kind of looking at that, moving the right staff, just breaking it down into those aspects, and I'll try to always within workshops that people are taking something practical away. So right, twos here, let's look at one behaviour or one habit we can try to be ingraining or implement within our weekly routine that's going to support that leg. So you might have staff talking around, right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a book for 30 minutes before going to bed, where that's going to help me unwind before bed. It's going to help me relax. And then I suppose the thing with doing it in twos is then you've an accountability partner where you're getting them to check in. But I suppose a big thing to be saying to staff is like it's that when you are trying to create a new habit, even if you fall short from time to time, it's not the end of the world. So there's that aspect as well that I've set myself a goal to go to the gym and I don't do it. Well, then you beat up on yourself, so that can be counterproductive. So it's been kind to yourself as well, but at the same time, back to that concept, I suppose, of challenge and support, where you are challenging yourself. You've got an accountability partner who's there to support you, but ultimately it's for the good of yourself, trying to keep balance to that table.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. And I think it's very important stuff that you're talking about and that you're implementing within it, and to, as you say, be able to get people at the youngest age possible with the kids, and try and implement those things at that point, then to support them through those teenage years that have the potential for people to go one way or the other. and make potentially poorer decisions that can set their life in one direction, or better decisions in another. And then also to have the people who are educating, essentially the people of the future, having those become more stable and better people, I suppose, essentially is really a three-pronged approach that's, making a good change in the world. So very interesting to hear you talk about it, and you're doing good work out there. A final few sort of questions that are maybe a little bit more about you, to give a little bit of insight into yourself, which firstly, which is kind of related to what we talked about, but how have improv classes helped your ability to present to children and adults, I suppose?
Good question. Yeah, so I suppose the background, I do improvisation, where basically it's how would you describe it? You're up on stage, you get a suggestion, and you have to make scenes, or act things out based on a suggestion from the audience. So I suppose a lot of it, you're having to think on your feet, you're having to be creative. I suppose a big part of it is trust. That. So I would do two prov, which is me and a partner, and we're called the Deerstalkers. We're performing at a festival in Kildare in October, so we're really excited about that. Yeah, improv festival. So there'll be 150, 200 people at that. So it's like, whoa, but it's really, really excited about it. But there's that point of, you have to trust the person to feel that complete trust in him. And even like, I might come in with an idea, I might think something's right, he'll fire something else at me. So you have to let go and go with it. So there's that idea of going with what's in front of you. I suppose the whole premise of improv at times as well is yes and. So when you're provided with an idea or whatever, you yes, and then you build on it. But yeah, I suppose for me, improv really is, it's just like it's gone in to, so like it is completely out of your comfort zone, because you just do not know what to expect. So you get things thrown at you totally unexpected. So I suppose in times in life when you get curveballs thrown at you, you can sort of ride with the punches as well. But there's been some shows where we've died in a rush, like so. But again, back to the idea, you learn from it as well. So there's been shows that haven't gone well, and we'll sit down. Again, back to the idea of talking. We'll sit down, we'll look through and see where, well, this is why this happened, or I wasn't listening to what you were saying, Phil. There, I didn't, So there's, I suppose, improv teaches you skills of listening, responding, and going with the flow.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like actually there's a lot of parallels there with sport as well. Staying in the present moment, watching back game tape, the whole lot.
Great crack. It is great crack. Well, you just don't take things so seriously, like, as well. So it's back to that leg analogy, Connor. That's part of my triple F leg. I do that for that fun element of life, and I think it's a good question to ask. Like, people, like, what are you doing in life that gives you joy? What is your thing? And finding time within your week as best you can. Obviously, people are busy and juggling commitments, but committing to doing things in life that give you enjoyment. Life is to be enjoyed. Like, I'm getting a bit deep here, but yeah, that's kind of where I suppose it's practicing what you preach as such.
Yeah, very good. Do you have a favorite athlete of all time?
Oh, do I have a favorite athlete? I suppose good question. I suppose in present day, like, I'm quite, Simone Biles has been sort of someone who have been, just because of what she's went through, been at the top, being her own person, dealing with it, and then coming back. There's a great story as well. Actually, I love it's an Olympic swimmer from the 70s. He's a guy called John Naber, and he was a backstroke swimmer. So he was thrown off the 1972 Olympic relay team from the States because he was basically he was too slow. So he set himself a goal and a target to come back 4 years later to win gold. Right? But the issue was that for him to do that, he had to improve by 4 seconds, over 4 years, which, like, in elite sport, it was people were saying, you know, we were off the charts. Like, but he came, he was public with this goal that he was setting for himself. So the story of how he broke it down was cool. So he was like, people were saying 4 seconds, not a chance. But he went from 4 seconds to 4 years, right? If I improved by a second a year, if I improved by 10th of a second a month, if I'm in the pool 30 days a year, if I improved by 300 of a second, each and every session I'm in, if I can find an improvement of a fifth of an eye blink, each and every time I'm in the pool, that'll add up to those 4 seconds over the 4 years. I tell the pupils that story, and then how do you think he did? How do you think he done at the next Olympics? And they're like, I know he was caught with drugs, but he wasn't. But he ended up getting gold. So I really, really was like, well, I've never seen him in action. I thought it was a really good story around, you know, just setting yourself a target, being bold about it, and then breaking it down. I suppose a GA background, like, you know, he was younger than me, but he was my club mate, Paul McComiskey. Because I was able to see firsthand, he was led down 2010, just absolute incredible player. Played in the same full forward line as him, but just seeing how he approached things and the level that you needed to be striving to achieve things in life was, me firsthand at quite a young age. It was, and as I say, he was open. He was younger than me, but it was a good eye opener, like to have a mate that you're playing with, and you know, seeing what it takes. So yeah, you caught me off guard with that one. I suppose there's other athletes I've looked at over the years, just in terms of skill level and stuff. Matthew Letitia, you know, just from Premiership in the 90s. I was a Newcastle United fan. I loved Alan Shearer, so there was quite a few. I suppose like people that are younger I would have really looked up to.
Nice one. Do you have a favourite memory from your own sporting career?
I've two. One was 10. It was a primary school all county final, 7-a-side. We'd never ever won it before, and it was like, so we're 3 points up. The other team got a penalty to score. So last minute of the game, last play, ball worked out a kick out. I got in the end of it, put over the bar, and then the whistle went. And then like there was just like all the school ran on the pitch. We were taken around the village in a lorry. It was just like, it was like you were like a celebrity at 10 years old. And then the next year, P7, I was captain of the team, and we didn't even make the quarterfinals. So even at that young an age, sport was teaching you, the ups and the downs. We won an All Ireland sevens, junior sevens title. So 2016. But it took us. We had been at this. So the Down sevens winners, good representation. Or if you won the junior championship in Down, you get invited down. It was on before the All Ireland weekend. And we had been down about 6 occasions. We were getting beaten in semi-finals, beaten quarter-finals, and I think it was 33 when we went down. I was like, this is our last go at this, and ended up actually getting over the line. So I suppose it was that was a real sense of euphoria that, like, it's hard to put your finger on. You can't really describe the feeling of it, but when you've been working really, really hard try and achieve something, and you don't think you're going to get there, but you finally do, just with a group of friends that that you grew up with. I think there was something really, really special about that 5 minutes in the changing room after that was just, I suppose, one of the most powerful emotive feelings I've ever had from sport. So that's two standouts for me personally.
Nice. The last question before we sort of finish up, which is, and hopefully this one doesn't throw you off in any way, but do you have someone from, say, history or even present day that you'd like to have the opportunity to sit down with for a coffee and pick their brains?
That's a tough question. What sort of answers do you normally get from that?
I've worded it in different ways, and people, the first thing people usually say is, geez, I wish you'd warn me about that, because I know if I had time to think about it, I would know what my answer would be. People have said different athletes, but people have also said family members who have passed. People have said
Granda, actually.
So
actually, I had this conversation with my mum on the way. It was from Dundrum to Belfast, and we're talking with Granda, and I was saying, he had been alive, like he had a real shrewd business head. He was a pig farmer, but Mum had been saying, the haggling in the village between local farmers. She says that always seen the pigs going up and down the road, but in terms of being a shrewd businessman and just being able to grasp life, it probably would have been invaluable for me. In my business as well, as well as obviously being that close, obviously blood member. But who else then? So there's family members, there's members of history, there's
people have said different celebrities, people have said different musicians. My mind personally would go towards maybe different philosophers or people who have probably shaped the world as we see it today. I think of even people like Steve Jobs and Da Vinci would be a big one for me, of the type of person that I would like to sit down and have a chat with. It's probably one of those ones to for people to go away and ponder rather than maybe being put on the spot. So
the football coach from the 80s, Brian Clough, you aware of him?
Liverpool, was it?
Sorry, no, he was not.
Was he Liverpool? No, right.
He was Forest. So he took Nottingham Forest from Division 1 to win the European Cup within a season or two. And just his, I read his book, but some of his understanding of psychology and stuff, the things he was up to, incredible. He just seemed to know, he knew when to support, when to push, and even the way his players would talk around him. I think Roy Keane made his I don't know if you won't get away with this now, but Roy Keane made his debut against Liverpool and he was man of the match. And Brian Clough called him up to his office. So the story goes anyway. And Keane thought he was on for some sort of raise or some sort of contract, and Clough handed him a pair of dirty boots. And he's like, "Go away and wash them, son." So it's just to bring him down to earth, like. But yeah, it's a hard question to answer, Connor.
Yeah, it's one that potentially for future people maybe give the heads up that I'll ask this at the end.
Everyone's managed to answer it, yeah.
Everyone's managed to answer it. Most people have again indicated that they would have liked to have a time to think about it, just to give what their actual answer would be, because I think everyone knows there is someone who I would love to think, sit down and say, how does that person think, or how did they go about doing this or that? But when you're on the spot, it's maybe something you don't think about on a day-to-day basis. And I don't know if it's Brian Clough. I have a notion just when you said the name that I think I'd heard a quote from him that was like, he said something like, if you find yourself in front of goal, put the ball in the back of the net and we'll talk about what you should have done afterwards. Or something. It was a quick one-liner. It's like, don't worry about it now. It's just put the ball in the back of the net and then worry about it. But
he also said nothing grows in a stagnant pond. So he used to do things just to shape the whole environment up, like drop someone or But yeah, he was full of one-liners.
Must look into it a bit more. Right, final thing, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can go and find out about what you're doing or follow along.
Obviously, then we would be pretty active on our social media channels, Hip Psychology, so it's HIPPSYCHOLOGY. So Instagram, Facebook, website www.hipsychology.com, and then they would be the main areas where we put out content. And obviously we're trying to just trying to put content out that's going to add value to people, in their day-to-day lives. So.
Thanks for listening, and if you consider yourself an everyday athlete, whether you play sport or want to pursue other athletic goals, consider checking out the Everyday Athlete program at the link in the episode description. There you'll find what's involved in the program, testimonials from the lads we work with, and how to apply.